If you were with us 4 years ago, you may remember their story. One of the youth that Jackie was appointed to was Savannah. Savannah's case was tragic, like all of the cases that we see come through our doors, but this one was a little different. Jackie came forward with many concerns about the foster care placement that Savannah and her siblings were in. Sometimes Jackie wasn't allowed into the foster home. There seemed to be a great deal of animosity towards Jackie during her foster care placement. And some of the alarming things that happened during their visits led Jackie to share these concerns about the placement. Our caveat, of course, is while Savannah's experiences in this placement were less than ideal, we are blessed in our community with a lot of wonderful foster parents. So our message here today is certainly not to villainize all foster parents, but we decided to share Savannah's story because not every home is perfect, and sometimes our youth are not always better off in foster care as most people believe. It was working with Savannah that Jackie realized that things needed to change and advocated very strongly that a permanent home for Savannah and her siblings be found immediately for Savannah to thrive. Please help me welcome to the stage Jackie Cunningham and Savannah Smith.
Thank you, Zane. I am so honored to be here with all of you, and there are few things that I enjoy more than sharing the adventures of being a CASA volunteer for the last 17 years. About 5 years ago, Savannah and I had the opportunity to reconnect, as Zane said, when she contacted the CASA office to see if I was still volunteering. Reconnecting with Savannah has been such a joy for me, and she inspires me to continue advocating for the children of Pueblo. When I first met her, Savannah was a very reserved 13-year-old girl. I quickly connected with her brothers, but it took me a little more time to earn Savannah's trust. One thing I realized very quickly was that this foster home was not ideal. As Zane mentioned, I did not receive a warm welcome in this foster home, but nonetheless, I knew I had a job to do for the court, and no one was going to stand in the way of me making sure that these children were receiving the care they needed. In addition to being a caring older sister, Savannah was an excellent student. She also played basketball, and I remember cheering for her at her games and thinking, I better not cheer too loud because I don't want to embarrass her and mess up the relationship we're starting with. In the past, when Savannah and I have spoken together about our adventures, I've shared the difficulties that she and her brothers shared in this foster care placement. As I spent time rethinking my stories for this talk, I concluded that it was maybe time to move on from the past. I'm certainly not going to make any excuses for a passive, aggressive, and uncaring foster care provider. However, Savannah has made the decision to move on, and so must I. When the weather cooperated, we liked to go to a nearby park and play outside. Going to movies and eating out were also ways that I had an opportunity to bond with these children and just listen to them. I wanted the three of them to be able to get out of the house and just to enjoy being normal children and have fun. My main objective was to be the person they could talk to and trust. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, given the situation that they were in and the professionals that were in and out of their lives. In fact, at this time, Savannah wrote a poem that I would like to share with you. We've kept it in the CASA file all these years, and it's called Lost. Living for today, hoping for the future. Nothing stays the same. People change, families change, life changes. This world is a mystery. How did it all begin? Where did God come from? Is this a dream? It feels like a fantasy, only not a good one. Too many breakdowns, too little greatness. Someday we will be gone. Who knows where we'll go? I don't know why I'm here, for I have not found my purpose yet. I wait to live my dream, but I have not the power, for I'm stuck in this place with nowhere to go and no flower to water. Like many of the youth we have the privilege of working with, their hurt and their scars run deep. And there's a feeling of hopelessness and despair. I saw my job as making sure I did whatever I could to make things better. For Savannah, the end of 8th grade came. That meant graduation and the news that she and her brothers would be returning to Nebraska to a foster to adopt home. I got to share the news with them when we played in the park one last time. Of course I was thrilled for these kiddos, but I was sad for myself. But that's what we CASAs do. We celebrate with our kiddos and send them on their way, and we're better people for having met them, and we get to keep our sweet memories. After this case closed, I promised myself and the future children that I would advocate for that I would be fearless for them. I would make sure they knew how valued and important they were to me. Our theme for this wonderful celebration is Change a Child's Story, which makes me wonder, have I? I'll let you all be the judge of it. Time is fleeting, and it seems like just last month I was Savannah's CASA. I would like you to give a warm welcome to my former CASA child, all grown up, Savannah Smith.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here today. I wanted to start by saying that I'm so grateful that I've been given this opportunity to share my experience with all you guys. I hope that in turn my story will help others in need be given the opportunity to receive the same love and kindness that I had through the CASA program. My story doesn't really have a beginning and an end. My whole life has been affected by addiction. Even to this day, my family continues to deal with the consequences that drugs and alcohol cause. My mom's addiction affected her life for longer than it didn't. When she was a teenager, her mother passed away after a terrible battle with leukemia. After that, she began turning to alcohol to numb most her pain. Being an only child and the fact that her father had never really been a part of her life, she was forced to grieve the loss of her mom on her own. Fast forward to December 2008, which was my 7th grade year. My parents, my 4 siblings, and I were living in Kearney, Nebraska. As a result of something that occurred some years prior, my father had been recently placed in jail and ultimately went to prison. Being left alone to look after 5 kids by herself, my mother couldn't handle the stress that overcame her. She started drinking more heavily, often becoming so drunk that she would pass out throughout the day. At the age of 13, I was left to take care of my 2 little brothers by myself. My 2 older siblings were in and out of the house, also going through their own addictions and were addictions with substances. My mom decided to take my older sister and my 2 little brothers and I here to Colorado on very short notice in hopes that she could have some kind of support from family members that lived in the area. My uncle agreed to let us stay with him and his family for our visit, but it wasn't long before my mother continued also to drink there. One night, my mom was driving under the influence and she got arrested. Being that my sister was a ward of the state of Nebraska, she was taken back there to a foster home. This left my 2 little brothers and I behind. After my uncle realized that my mom would be in jail and in treatment for a while, he decided that he couldn't take care of the 3 of us along with his own 4 children. So that's when we were handed over to the foster care system. I knew from there on out I had to stay strong for my brothers as they were only 5 and 9 years old. Needless to say, I matured very quickly, realizing that my new priorities were to do everything in my power to make sure that those little boys were taken care of. After being moved into our assigned foster home, we slowly learned to adapt to this new lifestyle that we were given. It definitely wasn't easy. Our lives were turned upside down. Suddenly we were worrying about things that kids should never have to worry about. We often wondered how our brother and sister were doing, where they were at, were they okay? Was our mom ever going to come back for us? Would we ever be a family again? After worrying about these things for so long, I started to numb the pain by building walls around my emotions. I thought that if I put up a shield around my feelings that I wouldn't get hurt anymore. Soon after moving into the foster home, we were enrolled into new schools. Starting the year as a new kid is never easy, but I pushed through, making new friends and still getting mostly A's and B's. School became somewhat of a haven for me as I didn't look forward to going back to the foster home. And knowing that we were getting treated in a way that we didn't deserve was very hard to swallow. I wanted so bad for my voice to be heard, but there's only so much that a 13-year-old can do. Some nights were harder than others. Every so often, my little brothers would find their way into my room, and I would just hold them as they cried about how much they missed our parents and our family. I would wipe away their tears and comfort them the best that I could. After some time had gone by, my mom got on her feet, and we began having supervised visits with her. We would laugh and cry with her, looking forward to the things that we would plan to do once we could all be together again. We were given promises that we would be reunited with our family soon, but those promises were soon broken. My mother was told by a judge that if she could sober up and for a few months and have a steady job, they'd give us back to her. She continued to go back and forth with the courts, but in the end, she couldn't overcome her own struggles. It was clear that any hope of getting back with her was now non-existent. Living at the foster home, I remember always feeling like I wasn't wanted. One of the biological daughters of the foster parents was a little older than me, and she was pretty much forced to include me in things that she would do with her friends. She never wanted to hang out with me, never wanted to share things with me or really even get to know me. The youngest biological daughter in the home was closer to my little brother's age and wasn't very well behaved. She always acted like she was better than us and didn't really seem like the foster parents tried to change that at all. We pretty much needed permission to do anything, eat their food, watch TV, play outside. I was always uncomfortable when they'd take us to their social or family gatherings. We didn't really talk to anyone, and it seemed like they all could just kind of thought of us as another set of foster kids. One night we stayed the night at another house that took in foster kids also, and it happened to be a relative of the foster parents that we were staying with. One of the kids they had taken in was a teenage boy, a little older than I was. I'd always felt a little uneasy about him, and that night I was sleeping when he came into my room and sexually assaulted me. I didn't want to tell anyone, but I did confide in my best friend at the time about it. She ended up telling her aunt that she lived with, who then told my foster parents. They confronted me about it the next day and pretty much made it feel like it was my fault, or that I was making it up. It was always that way while we lived there. We would get accused of things that weren't true, like stealing stuff or lying to them. Throughout this period of time, we were given caseworkers and such that would come and go. Felt like I could never really count on anyone to stay in my life. But then we were introduced to Jackie, our CASA volunteer. At first I was standoffish because I taught myself to be that way and to be cautious opening up to people. After a few visits with her, we began to look forward to when we would see her again. She would always make our day better, and we knew that we could rely on her. I began sharing feelings with her, and I told her my thoughts about adoption. I told her that all of our friends and people that we considered family lived back in Nebraska, and we really wanted to move back there. I was warned that it was possible my little brothers and I could be separated if we got adopted by different families, and the thought of that terrified me. So I suggested that they get in contact with the church we had attended previously when we lived in Kearney. I thought for sure if anyone would adopt us, all three of us, it would be someone from that church. Some time had passed and we finally got the news that a family from our church agreed to adopt us. I was completely full of joy. They had one child of their own still living at the home, about a year younger than I was. They wanted to come out to Colorado and meet with us before we moved. So they came out and we visited with them, and it went great and everything was settled. Moving day came and everyone back in Kearney was so excited that we would be reuniting soon. As excited as we were to go back to the place we knew as home, we were also saddened by the realization that we wouldn't get to see Jackie anymore. She had become such a big part of our lives. One of the last visits we had with her, she took us to the park where we sat and had a picnic. We talked and laughed and then played in the park for a little bit. Some days later, she gave us this scrapbook that she made. that was filled with a bunch of pictures of us and her from that day at the park. It was a gift that I treasure, and I still have it to this day, which is a really nice memory to look back on every now and then. With her around, we finally had a voice. Our concerns and thoughts were getting the attention that they deserved. When Jackie was around, my heart was happy and I felt like I could be myself. She was always in a good mood, and her personality was so infectious that you couldn't help but want to be a better person around her. After catching up with her years later, I had a rush of happy memories come back to me, and it made me realize that our lives probably would not have turned out as good as they did without her and the CASA program. I'm so glad that this program was started and that Jackie chose to be a volunteer. It means so much to me knowing that she cared for us in our time of need, and that she was there to keep a smile on our faces and let us know that we were loved. Since we left Colorado, even though I've been blessed with reuniting with my biological family, it's definitely not been smooth sailing. To this day, we continue to deal with the detrimental effects that substance abuse has caused. On January 29th of this year, we watched my mom take her last breath after decades of addiction finally took its toll on her body. She was only 51 years old. It's been the most heartbreaking experience that my family and I have had to go through. It makes me think of all the horribly tough situations that youth in foster care have to cope with by themselves, or with little support. And that's part of the reason why I'm here today. I hope that I can help others get the support that they deserve and give them a choice to become stronger from their adversities instead of falling victim to them. I was given that choice, and I believe that part of that choice came from having a CASA volunteer, having someone there to lighten my spirits and bring hope when I didn't have any. Jackie believed in my brothers and I. I think every child in the system needs that kind of support, someone there for them when no one else is. The smallest kind gesture, a smile, a laugh, hug, or even an uplifting word can mean the world to them. With that being said, I'd like to end by saying thank you. Thank you, Jackie, for being our light when we were lost. Thank you, Zane, for leading this program and helping hundreds of children find hope. Thank you to every CASA volunteer for being the voice of an unspoken child. You are really appreciated more than you could ever know. Thank you so much.